I tell producers all the time, use this service because there are 25 million people there. Upload your beats there. And a lot of people don't even know it exists. Someone said we don't know what we're talking about.
Who said that?
We're not going to talk about the commenters. What's going down, everyone? It's the Music Entrepreneur Club podcast. My name is DJ Payne 1. That's Dame Ritter. That's Aaron Knight. And we have a special guest today, which we haven't had for a while. He is the illustrious, the infamous DJ Z. How are you feeling, sir?
I'm good. I'm happy to hear that while you haven't had guests for a while, you brought me in as your first in a while. So thank you for having me.
Well, we have to balance things out because Aaron is excellent. And then me and Payne, she has the Excellence Academy. Me and Payne, we are meh. And then we needed somebody else that was excellent. So we had to reach out to see. So no, this is going to be a dope episode. We had an exchange on Twitter because of all of the songs that are being released, right? I think the number now is 100,000 songs songs. We can talk about that too, per day. And we wanted to bring Z in because he had some comments about it on Twitter and we wanted to talk about it. Like, how did we get here? Does it matter? Things like that. But before we jump into that, Z, give us the latest and greatest in Audiomack. Like what's happening? Like, let people know like what's happening in Audiomack and why people should have their one of the 100,000 songs there as well.
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to plug my service at the beginning of this show and not at the tail end. Everything's going great at Audiomack. We're nearing 25 million monthly active users globally. And I think excitedly over the past few years, we've seen such a surge in usership in sub-Saharan Africa. We're the number one streaming service in Nigeria, and we're top 5 in Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, and South Africa. What's going on in sub-Saharan Africa is so exciting because they're building infrastructure that does not exist. And more of the youth are gaining access to cell phones and streaming services. And whereas before there were limitations in place, right? You had extremely hard cap data plans, limited or unreliable Wi-Fi, which made streaming music difficult. And so piracy reigned supreme. YouTube was the preferred platform, but YouTube, you have to stream the music through video, which is way more bandwidth intensive. So we created a product that caters to their needs, and importantly, are curating and editorializing the incredible sounds that are coming from that region. So we're most excited about our growth there, as well as our continued growth in the US and in Canada. I think the future of streaming is in what we're doing, which is more of a niche service. We're not trying to be all things to all people. We're not curating every single genre. We're not a full catalog service, which allows us to do all of those things with the limited real estate that you see on a cell phone. Right, no one's going on desktop anymore. So yeah.
And was the presence in Africa, was that purposeful, or did you guys start the service and notice like, hey, something's happening here, let's cater to it? Or did you guys?
The latter, right? Okay. So, most of our user base was predominantly in the US up until about end 2017, early 2018. I think what helped us was we started offering features on the ad-supported version of the app that you could only find on the premium full subscription versions of our competitors, right? So the ability to download music offline when you don't have mobile data or access to Wi-Fi is really helpful, especially in areas where you have limited Wi-Fi or limited data. And then when we saw our usership going up in sub-Saharan Africa, we doubled down. We opened up a satellite office in Lagos. We hired local, and we started curating heavily, not just for those who used the app in Africa, but for our users in the US and in Canada, so as to introduce their sounds to the rest of the world.
Dope. Super dope. All right. Does somebody else want to queue up the topic and the conversation? I definitely don't want to dominate the voice, but does anybody else want to outside of Payne or Aaron, do you want to kind of cue up the topic so we could jump into it?
So we're just going to discuss the oversaturation of music, especially when it comes to independent music. So I think that this is a fascinating topic. And Z, we do want to defer to your opinion because you're coming in as an outside expert. So I think we could take two routes. We could either go the Spotify route, or we could go the Spotify via TikTok route, because there's another Billboard article that talked about it. So I want to know, I know you have strong opinions about this, Z, so I just want to know, what do you feel like the problem is? But I also want you to bring up a solution, because I think that a lot of people are going to be like, okay, well, I was told just to drop singles to build a fan base. Now y'all are saying this is too much. What should I do? So one, I want you to address the problem, because some people won't see why this is problematic. And then two, maybe talk about a solution, and then we can jump into the conversation with you there.
Absolutely. Right. So it's the first article that had come out last week, in the subheader, the deck that goes directly below the headline, it asked, who is this benefiting? And so when I socialized it, I highlighted the three groups, right, that I don't think are benefiting right now. So let's break each group down, right? So the first group are fans, music fans, users, right? I think it's important to contextualize that most streaming service users are passive listeners, right? They're pressing play on what they're already familiar with and what the service itself is pushing toward them. Most are not discovery-driven, lean-forward users. I should point out that because we're a highly curated, non-full catalog service, Audiomack sees a much different user than that of Spotify, okay? But in particular, we're going to make this conversation about full catalog services, right? So from the user perspective, I mean, every single day to have on average, 100,000 new songs added, it's like, that's real. First of all, that's really overwhelming. Second, it's important to note that that total is tracks, and that's a combination of individual songs and songs on albums. For those who are unfamiliar, when a product is delivered to a streaming service, there's only two groups, songs and albums. So even if it's a 2-song EP, it's still considered an album as far as delivery. And so it's adding up all of those total tracks between the two groups. But the streaming services, there's a finite amount of real estate with which they have to highlight and aggregate and using the algorithm showcase for users. And so it's already a crowded field, and it just makes it that much harder, right, to highlight that music in that finite amount of space. If you're the service provider itself, you're actually paying to host all of these files on your service. And we're talking about billions of terabytes worth of storage space, which costs the provider millions and millions of dollars in hosting and bandwidth costs a month. I think that people see like the market cap number for a Spotify, which is in the tens of billions, and they think to themselves, they're rich, they're raking in money. It's important to note, though, that for as successful as Spotify has been, they've only had one profitable quarter in their history. One quarter of the year, so 3 months they were in the black. Annually, historically, they're in the red. That's how difficult it is to be profitable as a streaming service because of, but for example, these hosting costs. So I guess I'll pause right there for all of you to weigh in with all of that in mind.
Well, this probably is, like, all of these points are still going to be valid, but, you know, obviously the 100,000 songs, I mean, we have producers now that are uploading instrumentals. There's like, I mean, there is a shitload of songs. So all of our points are still going to be valid, but all of these, I don't think are, you know, because I know that some producers just have a shitload of beats on their hard drive. They're like, oh, this could be another opportunity to like promote my beats. And they're just like, still like, you know, we're not curating that stuff. But I think that's besides the point, because the truth is, like, there's a shitload of music being uploaded every day. even if not all of them are traditional. So, and even I think some sounds and like some other things are being uploaded. Like people just don't care what's being uploaded because it's, they just pay their DistroKid or whatever annual fee and they can just upload whatever,
Yes.
So, but yeah, Payne, did you want to weigh? Did you want to weigh in on it thus far?
I do want to pick up on just the keyword beats. Obviously, that stands out to me, and I always encourage. Anytime a producer contacts me and asks me for help building their career, I always say, wherever the people are, your beats should be. And Audiomack is one of those 25 million people every month. So again, what's cool about Audiomack and why I tell producers to upload their beats there is because they're responsive to what the people are asking for. So you didn't always have a separate beats chart, and now you do. And you didn't always have a beats genre, and now you do. So it interfaces well. It's not like you're competing with a BeatStars or another sort of service that's licensing beats. It interfaces well with that, and you're sending traffic. So I tell producers all the time, use this service because there are 25 million people there. Upload your beats there. And a lot of people don't even know it exists. And so that's the part that I think a lot of producers get wrong, where they just don't realize that there are all these services out there where there are people already there. There's already an audience for what you're creating. And I think that applies to all artists. Now, obviously, beats is kind of a smaller niche, especially when you're trying to license them. It's not like the lo-fi world. That's a little more saturated. I don't know what your opinions are on that as it relates to non-vocal music. I think people can see this number or hear about this conversation that we're having to get pretty discouraged. And I think that's where we come in, because given how much music, just the sheer volume of it is getting uploaded, simply uploading music, unfortunately, from my observation, is still the dominant marketing plan by most DIY and unsigned artists. Step 1, upload music. Step 2, see what happens. How are people utilizing the Audiomack platform in creative ways that you've seen?
Well, first of all, thank you for the praise. Let me know where you want me to cut that check. Second, I think our service is unique in that the creator's journey is going to be different on our platform than on competitor platforms, because we allow you to start that journey and work with us directly to monetize your music without needing to work through a distributor or a label, which is definitely not possible if you want to get your music up on every store. So for instance, if you're an artist or producer and you have grand designs on making sure that your beats or your songs are available on Spotify, you have no choice but to work with a distributor which will deliver your work through their supply chain to Spotify. With Audiomack, you can create an account yourself. You can begin uploading manually. You can apply for authentication, which is basically the ticket to applying for monetization. We essentially need you to verify you are who you say you are. And once we do that, then you can directly start earning royalties on the platform that you're not sharing, by the way, with the distributor. Oftentimes, we see artists begin their journey in this way. They're able to utilize our supporters and premier access features, which allow you to engage your fans or users of our platform to purchase, they're not NFTs, but badges that memorialize their support of your work on the page itself. You then get the opportunity to communicate directly with the creator. So the creator can log into their creator dashboard and message their supporters, which is especially helpful for future marketing. So if you've gained supporters for a new song, the next time you release a song or an album, you know who the people are willing to spend money beyond just streaming your work, which enhances the fan-creator connection, which is really everything. You don't need millions of people to support you. You need a few thousand people who are willing to spend money on you, and that will allow for a sustainable career. Just to address one point, Payne, that you made, which is basically around what are the expectations. if the expectation is like you're working through your creative journey and you're just trying to figure out who you are, and in the meantime, you want the world to potentially gain access to that, then just release. And to your point, make sure your work is available everywhere people are streaming music. If the expectation, though, is that you're going to get editorial placements, curators and marketers on all these services, I can tell you, are already overwhelmed at the sheer volume of priority releases being pitched to them by labels and distributors. So if you're not working through a label or distributor, or you are, but it's like a DistroKid, TuneCore, CD Baby, where they're not really pitching, right? It's even more difficult because there's just only so many hours in a day to listen to music and make editorial decisions. So if your expectation is to get on playlists first week, that's going to be difficult. And that's what we need to state. But if you want to just make sure your music's available everywhere people are streaming, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, go for it.
Z, do you think there's a time or where because most music on these platforms is not being listened to, right? I forget what the number is, but what the stats are around that. But like most music is not being listened to, and because of all of the storage space that it's taking, like, are they ever just gonna just start taking stuff off the platform that just does if it hasn't gotten one stream in 2 years, like, can they take it off? Like, is it against their policies? Or will Audiomack ever kind of take stuff down that
we won't? No, we won't. But then again, because we're not a full catalog service, we're not getting everything up. So we're in a wholly unique place as compared to Spotify. Now, that is already happening to a certain degree, right? So for instance, if you use DistroKid, which is extremely popular in the DIY bedroom artist space, you're basically committed to working with them for the long haul. If you should at any point in time choose to work with a different distributor, perhaps one that utilizes label services, and or you get picked up by a label and part of your deal requires you to turn over to them your entire back catalog, which means any titles you deliver through DistroKid, they will automatically issue takedowns to all services for any title that they previously distributed. So to a certain degree, this is already built in, this is already sort of happening, but I don't think Spotify would make that call. But they've made loud and clear, and this is not necessarily a criticism, but they've made loud and clear that they are de-emphasizing music. Right. They are emphasizing podcasts. They are emphasizing audiobooks. And what that really means is they're emphasizing content that they're not paying for at a higher clip, right? Because the podcasts, you're not paying royalties on them every time people are streaming them. The audiobooks, you're licensing to have them on your platform, but you're not paying every time someone listens to one. Every time you're listening to a song, like the cash register is going cha-ching, and it's costing them a fortune, right? So that valuable real estate that artists are competing for, they're now competing with other artists and authors and podcast hosts.
Yeah. And I don't want to start talking about podcasts, but I'm still confused by that. I don't know why they wouldn't pay for streams of podcasts either.
Of course they wouldn't pay, Dave. Of course they would.
I don't know why it's not like a law or something. I don't understand why podcasts don't monetize, but that doesn't need to be we don't need to go down that route.
We can rendezvous at a later date. Talk about that. I have strong opinions on that as well.
What I did want to talk about though is okay, now we have this huge problem. It used to be kind of a release a week was a decent cadence, and some people would even recommend that to artists if they can keep up with that kind of creative output. And now from what I'm hearing, a good cadence of release is every 3 to 4 weeks. What's your opinion on that in terms of the cadence of releases and what would be most beneficial for independent artists if they can keep up with that creative output?
Yeah, I mean, as a non-artist myself, I always have to be careful wording my recommendations because, as a creative, do what your creative heart desires. But there undoubtedly are better paths to take in this marketplace. And to that end, I would say it doesn't make much sense if you don't have a built-in audience of fans, not followers, not just the people who tick a box and are interested in what you have to say on social media. But fans, those who go to your shows and buy your merch, if you don't have fans, you don't need to release albums. Because from a curatorial and editorial standpoint, the likelihood that that's going to get picked up is slim to none. You'd be better off consistently releasing songs and or packaging a few songs into EPs with focus tracks that you released ahead of the EP as a song. Because what you're going to do is you're going to essentially buy more lottery tickets. You're going to give yourself a chance for more placements, more opportunities, more engagement, more sharing. Slowly but surely over time, you're building up a catalog. So then when something does potentially take off, the user journey is more impactful, right? Think about it. If I just discovered you, either from a playlist or by happenstance, and I'm really impressed with what I heard, typically the first step is I navigate over to your artist profile page and I see what I've missed out on. What did you release that I didn't know about? And if you have a lot there, you've captured potentially that user and turned them into a fan. If you're releasing but one album a year, when I navigate to that artist profile page and I see that your last drop was 9 months ago, I'll probably still tap in, but I'm probably less excited. And so that consistency over time is the best path forward. Now, that said, if you're not prolific, if you like to take your time during the creative process, if you're an artist who has a full or part-time job and you're only recording on the side, perhaps none of this is even possible. But that is the best path, in my opinion.
Yeah, and one of the issues I have with platforms that I don't think they're incentivized to help with is that it's very difficult to, like, if somebody does discover you, like say you're listening to a playlist and they're just kind of hearing things, like it's, even if you hear something you like, it's hard to convert that person on a DSP into an actual fan.
Yep.
Right. For a lot of different reasons. I think Audiomack could be different in this case, and feel free to highlight some of the things that could help, like bring somebody that from your first listen to, you know, maybe to a follower or a follower on Instagram where they can keep up with your story and journey. Are there some features on Audiomack that exist to help with that aren't elsewhere? Or what would be your suggestion in kind of from first discovery to creating fans on these DSPs?
Absolutely. I think just in the way that we organize and construct artist profiles, right? So when you skip over to an artist profile page, at the top of the page, not the bottom, all of the artist's socials and other links are presented, even to what I would consider competing platforms. We allow artists to link directly to their TikTok and their YouTube at the top of the profile. Comparatively, on Spotify, you need to scroll down to the very bottom to get the bio, and if they added them, the links to external sites. And I understand they want you to stay within the Spotify universe, right? They don't want you to leave, even though if you're on a mobile device, you could continue to stream while utilizing another app. But we're all about the discovery journey and then building a base, both within the Audiomack orbit and outside of it. And I think, you know, that's shown in that we've become synonymous with the type of user who leans forward, is very discovery driven. The fact that our global trending, which is the first thing you see when you open up the app, it's basically a living playlist that's updated daily throughout the week. Comparatively on Spotify, if you make New Music Friday, that list is final for the next 7 days. And so if you released on a Friday, you didn't get any editorial support on Friday. On Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, off cycle the following week, we're still looking to curate and editorialize songs and albums from the previous week. And so, yeah, those are just but a few of the features I think that separate us, or at least make us unique and different.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like sometimes, like I've been on Spotify before, and their algorithm is so good at finding like similar sounding music. I'll get like 10 songs in and look back and realize that I switched artists 5 or 6 times, and I didn't even know. Looks like I'm frozen. Am I frozen to you guys?
You are frozen.
Yeah. I'll let it go, damn.
Boom, back in business. Yeah. So there was another article, I think a Billboard article. It was about like major label complaining about like how to cut through today, right? Because before they like everybody's attention was more centralized, right? You might just need to pull a few different levers. You might just need to do radio, a night show, and tour a couple times, and like your song was out of here. You know, now I think our attentions are divided. There's so many different platforms and things like that. We want to help artists. You know, I want everybody to weigh in and kind of like what's the strategy of kind of cutting through the clutter these days for independent artists? Aaron, obviously you work day to day with artists, and I'm sure you're going to have some nuggets here, but like, we need to give artists some advice on how to best position themselves to the greatest possibility of exposure. So anyone feel free to.
Well, can I start by asking what the fuck went on? I mean, just because, okay, the labels are complaining about the platforms with which they've had longstanding partnerships. The labels are complaining about the platforms with whom their partnerships allow them to be prioritized over everybody else. If the labels are complaining, one, I don't feel bad for them. And then two, things are bleak, right? I mean, is this even a valid complaint? What's going, like, did they create a monster and now the monster's attacking them?
Every time.
No, my bad, Aaron, go ahead.
You can go, Dame, but I love your line of questioning because I want to disrupt the slave ship right now, right? You know, like your master does not know what the fuck is going on and never has. We give them more power because our assumption is that they understand more. They don't. They've just monopolized something that they've never understood, which is why I've always said it's really important for artists to own their IP, right? So if going back to what Z said, that Spotify has only had one successful quarter, why are we thinking that they're the best at this, right? By any other standards, if you are an independent music business and you have lost money consistently every single month by the shit ton, and you have one successful quarter, you are an unsuccessful business. But because of the games that they get to play and the debt that they get to leverage, they are seen as the one who's doing it right, the master, whatever. So I heard this about Netflix last night. Netflix has not had Netflix has lost money since they started and continues to lose money. Their business model shifted and they have not been able to adjust. They keep dumping money into shooting films versus licensing films, and they're on a subscription-based model. So one, I just want to talk about how they don't know what they're doing, period. None of these companies know what they're doing. Everybody who thinks they don't know what they're doing, right? And because the landscape of like Spotify is a tech company, right? We're creators giving the power to this tech company. The tech company is just looking to make money. So they're cannibalizing us now, which is why they just keep breaking down the percentages. And now they're like, hey, actually, we don't even care about music. We realize we can make more over here on podcasts. They are a content company. In fact, they are an IP revenue company. Like, so they're generating revenue off of IP that they don't have to create, right? So they should be in a revenue share split situation. I could talk about that, but I think that the issue here is that we have empowered Spotify to call the shots. I think that we're at the turn of the century, right? And I say Spotify because yes, Apple Music is there, but Apple Music is reactionary, and this is no shot to Apple Music, but Apple Music was created as a reaction to what was happening in the market because they thought that iTunes was going to be the future. And it was the turn of the century. It was what made Spotify what it is today, but it's not. Anyways. So I just want to point out to creators that they don't know what's going on. If you can figure out how to monetize your audience, you will win, period. That's been the name of the game since the beginning. Direct to consumer, obviously, is something that people have always been preaching. And it doesn't even have to be from as far as music goes. You can still release your music on streaming, but you can make money off of your consumers. So to answer your question, Dame, what we're talking about, the way that we look at all of our creators are IP owning content creators. We don't even, if you don't want to, we have an artist right now who is quadruple where he was on Spotify last year and has only dropped one song because he's a content creator, right? We're leveraging the fan base that he already had, directing them to come back to what he had already created. And now they're discovering music that we've already dropped and they love it, right? I do believe that for the most part, you have to refresh people, you have to offer new things, but people don't necessarily need new music. They just need new entertainment, right? If artists get out of being so hell-bent on saying, I want you to love my music, no, you want them to love you. I ask in the Excellence Academy all the time, if somebody would pay you $1 million to play video games all day, would you do it? Everybody says yes. You don't want to be paid $1 million to make music. You want the freedom to make music, right? So the freedom to make music and to enjoy it comes from building content and monetizing it, or building a fan base and monetizing it through your brand, right? So I think that is the future. That is, instead of saying, well, Rush dropped a song every week for a year. Well, this person did this. Well, what do you have and what can you do to leverage what you have? That's what artists should be doing. These companies don't know what they're talking about. These companies have never known that they're talking about. And they've been telling us, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. What you need to do is find your people and then serve your people. And that looks different for everybody. And I think that the way that the streams are going, they're going to continue to deprioritize music. So you're going to continue to give them IP that lives on their servers that you won't be able to make money off of, because it's going to become less and less beneficial to them and therefore less and less monetized for you.
And everything that what Aaron's talking about is what the labels don't understand and why they're mad. They're mad because they're going to actually have to work now, right? They're mad because they had relationships. They had a few levers that they could pull back in the day, and like, all right, it gave their artist a real shot. Now you have to, in my opinion, like get down in the nitty gritty. You have to understand community. You have to do everything that Aaron's talking about, and they never learned that, right? So I think this is where a lot of independent artists are kind of a step ahead of the game. Because even if you have a small community, you understand the type of engagement, the type of content, the type of things you need to be doing to start to build a business, right? And I think there are some smart people within labels that understand this, but like not like everybody as a whole yet. They're gonna need to hire a lot of people that think like Aaron, or that have this experience kind of building things brick by brick, to eventually start to understand like how they can leverage like what they're currently doing along with like a different way of thought to get success again. But that's not going to be just making a few phone calls, right? We're down in the trenches. We're responding to every comment. Like, you know, it's a different ball game. But Z, I know we've kind of talked a lot since the last time you weighed in. Like, feel free to win, and I know you have to go in like a minute or two. So
yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what Aaron shared. I think what we've seen is, as more independent creators have taken up the total market share on services, the major's response to that is to just buy back market share by scooping up previously independent distributors who now are housed under their umbrella, right? So Sony purchased AWOL, and Warner owns ADA. Several years ago, UMG scooped up InGrooves. We're going to continue to see this consolidation, which is going to help their bottom line. So now the artists can technically say that they're still independent, but that money is being funneled through to one of the three big dogs in the business. I think the principal issue, though, is the labels continue to sign artists, but they're not continuing to hire people in the buildings to work these bloated rosters. So on any given week, a major label wherein you sign to them and you have outsized expectations as compared to working with an independent distro, they'll release somewhere between 20 and 40 records over 7 days. But there aren't 20 to 40 digital marketers and account managers to work all of this. And if everything is designated as a priority when it's positioned to services, then nothing is a priority. You can't say every single release I have this week is a priority, because the recipient of that correspondence is going to go, well, where do I start then? If everything is the same, then it's all the same. We're in a unique position. Earlier Aaron mentioned, like, what is the solution to all of this? I think it really is based on where you are at in your career. How far along are you? What type of leverage do you maintain? How fast do you work? And what are your overall expectations for being a full-time musician? Aaron used the word content. Some artists are really comfortable with embracing content creation and being considered a content creator. They understand the dynamics of the marketplace. Others who are more sensitive, they hear that word and they think, don't clump me in with the people who make vlogs on YouTube with respect to all the niche industries. So if you're someone who feels comfortable embracing content creation, and it's easier for you to create micro content daily and weekly than it is for you to come up with a really great 2-minute and 30-second song, then release less and focus on marketing an audience to that release. On the flip side, if you're a true artist and your brain breaks every time you have to think about how to market to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, etc., then make sure you have a presence in all of those places, but throw more time, attention, and energy into your actual craft, knowing that if you can get people to an artist profile page on a DSP, that more than anything else will sell them. Ultimately, like, there is no magic bullet here. Marketing has never been more difficult, ever. However, the pro, because I think I should leave on a positive note here. The pro, if you're a creator, is whereas before, in order to successfully market, you needed a ton of money. And now with creativity, ingenuity, and all these platforms where you can build an audience, you can do that without all that money, or at least start doing it without all that money. And then if you come into money, it hopefully should be easier, but you should also know that money by itself is not going to make a difference. And I know that because I'm friends with artists who have signed major deals, who have 6-figure and 7-figure marketing budgets, and they couldn't sell 1,000 cap room in a top 5 US city. So that tells you hopefully all you need to know about how far money can actually get you. I'll leave on this note. If you really, really care about music being a full-time job, either as an artist, a writer, or a producer, ignore all of the data that you see highlighted in these headlines. Don't worry about how many tracks are uploaded on average a day to full catalog services. Understand that you're trying to build an audience and you're not competing for real estate on these services. You're competing for people's free time. They have a finite amount of time over 24 hours to consume on-demand entertainment. And what you're competing for is for them to listen to your work as opposed to watching Netflix or reading the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or scrolling Twitter or watching porn or listening to a podcast, etc. So think about how you can make what you're creating valuable enough where people think, if I only have an hour, I'm going to consume that as opposed to any of these other things.
For sure. All right, we'll stay on for another 10 or 15, but Z, appreciate you joining us, man, as always.
Thank you guys for having me. I hope I didn't talk your ears off.
I appreciate you.
That's what you were brought here to do. So thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Cool. Yeah, and so I think, I hate, well, I don't hate. I want to bring up LaRussell again, because I think he's just done an amazing job at creating like a story. Right. And I always tell people, like, hey, you have to have something about your story that's memorable, Because if you think about LaRussell, it's like, okay, if you follow him, like, what all do we know about him, right? We know that he's very family oriented because he's showing his mom like actually package orders. You see Pops come out in the pergola in the backyard. So the family values is big, right? We know that he has these shows in the backyard, right? He's creating these stories that people want to talk about, even with, splitting proceeds with his fans, right? The way he talks about it, he's going to be changing lives. Now, whether that's true or not, we can debate because so much music's being released. It's not even about how much money people are going to make from investing in this song. It's about the story. We're talking about that. And that's another talking point that, people bring up in podcasts and something that, resonates on social media. So I think that's really all, and people are probably going to get tired of me saying this, but that's really what it's about. I know so much I actually know LaRussell personally, but like even with other artists that I don't know personally, I feel like I know so much about them because they do such an amazing job, like telling their story, like via social media, one post at a time. And then you get invested in their world, and then you're kind of committed to listening or eventually purchasing something that they're putting out. So to me, that's really what it's about. And I don't never know how to say that so people kind of get what I'm talking about. I mean, I think some people get it, but a lot of people are still lost about that, or don't know where to start. And Aaron, I see you shaking your head. Do you have advice on kind of, because that doesn't happen overnight, right? Like LaRussell's been building for a while. Toby Nwigwe has been building for a while. Like all these artists that have these engaged followings, Snow the Product's been building for a while. Like, where do we start? Like, where do we start building that type of community?
Okay, that's it. Building community. People don't see it as that. Like in my bio, it says community builder. Every time companies call me, they're like, how do you keep making this work? I said, I'm a community builder. I just happen to be working in the music industry. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like people want fans and they don't know what that means. Fans don't exist anymore, truly. Like, unless you're like a super A-list celebrity, people are essentially either stalking you or they're giving you part of their time. And if I'm giving my time, I'm part of your community, right? But people don't see it that way. So then they're not serving their community. So they're just stealing moments. And that's all. I want to steal this moment. I want to steal your attention. The things that I love, my favorite podcast at 3:00 this morning, they dropped a new episode yesterday and I started watching it. It's one of the longest episodes they've ever dropped. I was up till 3 watching it because I was so intrigued. I'm part of the community though. They didn't steal that time from me. I wanted to give it, and I think that that's one thing. If we as creators look at who we have, that's why even Benoni has talked about it several times. That he loves the MEC because there's a community there. It's not just that we have numbers on our social pages, but every time he's come on to do an interview or we post a clip of his, he said he gets more followers and those followers engage with him and ask him questions. We have a community here. And that's because we're serving the community's needs. We're like, hey, there's artist managers, there's artists, there's producers. We're going to bring about a system to serve that need. Artists, the solution for your problem when the industry is overly inundated with things is serving your community. That's what I'm saying. Who are your people and what can you give them? And that's what I was saying at the end of the thing with Z. I will slightly disagree with Z. I don't think there's an option to not be a content creator. And I'm saying that as somebody who doesn't like being in front of the camera, who's had to become a content creator in order for what I believe is my mission to be spread, right? LaRussell said it last week. If you're not on the internet every single day telling people how incredible you are, they'll never notice. Right? You have to be grinding the pavement every day. If you look at, you say Toby, you say LaRussell, you say Snow, all of them are content creators. Yes, they want their musicians and they want people to pay attention to their music, but LaRussell is getting paid more for his content and for his live shows than his music. If his focus was being a music maker, then he would be stuck. I would say same with Toby. I know this because I've talked to his team. they're making exponentially more with brand partnerships, with live events, with special guest appearances than they are on the music side. Music is a lost leader. I've been saying that since I got on this podcast. I know everybody doesn't agree with it, but music is what you're sending out there. I know music is what you're sending out there to establish that, hey, I am a creator of things that people consume. I've created this IP, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then, because the reason I say that music is a lost leader is because I also represent authors. We're now starting to get into other media forms, and it's the same game. We do the same thing. We throw out that piece of content, we build more content around it to serve the community that we're hoping that they have. Then we go into that community, we ask questions, and we serve them more. So serve your community. That's how you grow a fan base. We grow when we grow. I grow when we grow. If we is not growing, then I'm not growing.
So I definitely agree that music, it just depends on like who you are and how you set up your business, right? Because music can be a loss leader, and that can be on purpose to employ the type of strategies that you're employing. So I mean, I think I don't always disagree. I just know that there are a lot of artists that are winning, you know, with the music in addition to other stuff, but the music is.
My thing is, if your music is the number one thing that you're making money off of, you have a ton of untapped potential. If you can convince enough people to stream or buy the thing that to make, like you said, there's that one artist whose fans consistently buy his music. I feel like he has a ton of untapped potential. He could be teaching a masterclass, or he could be having a weekend long experience with his super fans where they're paying a super premium rate, or he could have a subscription box where he's sending out every month to his top supporters. If you spend this type of money with me, you're going to get X, Y, do you know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that there aren't people who are making the most with their music, but I'm saying if in this digital era you're making the most with your music, there's untapped potential. It could be your loss leader.
Well, that I agree with that, but that's a different conversation. Like it being like your biggest revenue stream versus like you losing money, like putting out music. Right.
But when I say loss leader, I don't think that a loss leader has to be it doesn't have to lose. It just is not that you could spend the most making the music, but that's not what you make the most on. Like that's how most of my artists are. They spend the most because they really good mix engineers, really good mastering, and they're paying for their producers. It's what they spend the most time and energy on, but it's what we make the least on. So I'm saying the overall loss leader, not just they're losing money on it, because none of my artists are losing money on their music.
Right. So yeah, so I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm excited to start this label with BeatStars is because I think, you know, we're not entering into like long-term agreements. This really is more so like singles. But I think for artists on the level that we're reaching out to, it can be very beneficial to partner with us, you know, just for exposure to our community that we have, but two, just kind of thinking strategically about each release so we can kind of give each release like a bigger push than they can on their own. And we're even thinking about releasing music with Big Ja and starting a label. Essentially, you know, for every series that comes out is going to be accompanied with a soundtrack. Like it just makes sense. And music for Ja, that might actually be a loss leader, but it amplifies the messaging, it amplifies the story, and hopefully brings more people into his world, you know, as we partner with like other dope artists, you know, and we can share fan bases that way. We share fan bases with the artist. Hopefully the artist has fans to bring into our world. And then of course we have a bunch of fans on our side that we're gonna, you know, introduce the artist to. That's been pretty effective. A lot of the artists that we've worked with or put music into sketches, like they've definitely seen a bump in streams and just overall visibility as we promote artists. So I think that's one of the next steps with Ja and his content, because he's actually started to gain more momentum more recently. So part of me is excited, but it's like, damn, I got to work with more artists now. Like, but it's an opportunity. I think it's going to help a lot of artists. You know, I'm not going to reveal the details of the next series just yet, but it's a pretty dope idea that I think is going to go over pretty well with both the artist audience and ours. So, Payne, do we want to wrap this up? Do you have any? I know that and it's always tough, especially when we have a guest, to like, for everybody to get a word in, but I don't know if there's anything else we wanted to discuss before we wrap things up.
Yeah, I don't want to open up any cans of worms. I think it's great that we had Z on, especially given that Audiomack, in spite of its millions of users, tens of millions of users, is still, I guess, a smaller fish in the pond as far as DSPs, or I don't know if we're considering them a DSP, as far as music platforms are concerned. And there are other places to create community, to house your music, to build your brand, to find people, to find your people, as Aaron would put it. And unfortunately, a lot of us get caught up in, the big three, or however many, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music. I consider those the big three, but you can throw TikTok in the mix, even though they're a very specific kind of content, not simply music. So a lot of people just look at those three major platforms and think to themselves, well, if I don't get huge on those, if I don't have, thousands and thousands of listeners on those platforms, then I'm losing. And, realistically, same way I look at BeatStars, right? A lot of people are so focused on BeatStars plays, which I think is missing the point. Why don't my beats get more plays? Why am I not verified on BeatStars? Just kind of weird details that people perceive as beneficial to them, when in reality, what they need to be doing is sending real traffic from all of these other places to their beat store. If we look at, I know funnel's a bad word, but everything's a funnel. When you're running a business, when you're a creative, you want to funnel people to this final point, whether that final point is a stream, whether that final point is a merchandise sale, whether that final point is a Beats license. You want to funnel people to that point. You have an intended endpoint. If you don't have an intended endpoint, you need one. But if you don't, but if you do, then you kind of start to see where all of these platforms fit into your overall plan, into your overall funnel. So there are many, many, many different ways to bring people in, and focusing on the endpoint, i.e. the big three, this YouTube play, this Spotify play, this Apple play, this TikTok view. I think a lot of people are putting their attention in the wrong place. So I'm happy we had this conversation. Hopefully that inspires people to be at least a little less discouraged, because people are just shooting for the stars, and it's like, great, but you got to leave Earth first. A lot of people think they're just going to, blink and they're going to be on
Preach. Yes.
And I have this conversation all the time. I remember I had this conversation, and I told I don't remember if it was a producer or a rapper, but it applies to both. And this has been said a million times in the business community online, and I just feel like artists aren't internalizing it yet. Maybe people in general aren't internalizing it yet. But, it's a lot of people contacting me who have, 100 followers on social media, aren't doing great community building at all, because they're not even focused on community building. They're asking about radio. Big, big, big. They're asking about, how do I blow up on Spotify? Big, but how do I get signed to a major? All of these huge goals, all of these huge endpoints when they haven't even left the ground yet. And I told this one gentleman, don't think of it that way. Think of it this way. I mean, if you're focusing on these big, successes rather than sustainability, your sights are off. And let me just tell you this, break it down. If you have 100 fans and they spend $20 on you, how much money are you making that year? Okay, if you can do that, and then no one bats an eye at that. They're like, oh, I can build 100 fans, because that's not an intimidating number. So then you say, all right, add a zero to that, 1,000 fans. That's not crazy, right? Because people are looking at Drake. He's damn near a billionaire. I want to be like Drake. That's too intimidating for you right now. I mean, for most people, it's too intimidating. All right, get 1,000 fans. That's not crazy. Have them spend $50 on you a year. That's not even crazy. That's like a t-shirt and a show. That's it. People, if they like your music, people are consistently spending more than $50 a year on their favorite artist on a concert ticket or on a beat license. So do that 1,000 times and suddenly you made $50,000 off of your music. That should be mind blowing. And the gentleman I was talking to said, yeah, I never thought of it that way. I'm like, yeah, a lot of people aren't thinking of it that way. And as a result, they get intimidated because they're focusing on these huge goals. And it's beautiful to have huge goals, but it's also smart to focus on the between space between where you are now and whatever celebrity and riches you want to seek long term. So I'm glad we had this conversation. I'm live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on beatstars.live for my show Looped In. We make beats live. We had 30 Rock on last week, which is amazing. He's a diamond producer. And you probably know him, Aaron, because Atlanta. And I just assume
His name is 30 Rock?
Yeah. Yeah, he did the box for Roddy Ricch.
I didn't know he was in Atlanta.
He's in Eardrummers. I don't know if he's in Atlanta now.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, like, I just assume every creator in Atlanta just knows each other. Because that's just, I don't know.
It's kind of like that, though.
It kind of is. Every time I go there, like, yeah, everybody knows it. Everyone's going to everybody's event and they just know. So that's cool. So that's Looped In. But if you want to consume higher end content, check out Excellence Academy. And we got to stop clowning. All of our content is good. Aaron's is good. Mine is good. Dame's is good. But hey, if you want me to send you a text every time I go live, Dame, please remind them of the number because I always forget.
And we're good. We're just not excellent. But anyway, text MEC to 844-206-7800. You'll get a text before Pain goes live. Tap into those sessions. Yeah, I don't really have any updates. No, I'm not going to say anything just yet. I'm out. Yeah.
All right, we're all in suspense, so stay tuned, and we'll see what Dame's got up his sleeve. Appreciate you tuning in. Peace.
Peace.